Hello.
Hi, Eric. How are you?
Good. How are you, Catherine?
I'm good, thank you.
Nice to see you.
Eric.
Hey, Margie. I think that was Margie.
I
Yeah.
think it was-
It is.
Hey, Jordan.
Hi, Eric. Chris Mitchell from Esperanza Carmel.
Hey, Chris.
Hi, guys.
So let me go to the I think we're about ready to start the agenda. Let's see, we have Jordan, Catherine, me. Do we know if Carol will be joining us?
As far as I know, yes.
I was a little confused, and maybe because Jordan, I did not go on the tour since obviously we had been there last time. Did you go on the tour?
There was no tour.
There wasn't a tour on today's agenda. I asked Evan, but he said because the property had already been visited, was good to go.
Okay.
So no tour.
Hi, Jordan. Catherine.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Jordan. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Carol.
Hi, Carol.
Hi, Eric.
Hey, Carol.
Look at that seamless entry, Carol. Fantastic.
No, it wasn't actually. I had to go to a different site. I emailed Margie and said I can't get on, and then I went to another email and used that one, and it worked for some reason.
Good. Very good. Good, Carol.
No seamless with me.
Hey, Carol, if you go down to your bottom of your screen, you'll see a little stop video. If you click on that, then your face will appear.
Oh, stop video. Let's see. Start video. Got it.
There you go.
There you are. There you are.
And then the same to mute. There's a little mute thing, so you
Right.
just can click it on and off.
I'm used to this at the theater, but this is the first time we've done it with the city, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys are looking good.
Okay. Guess we can go ahead and go to the agenda here. Okay, I'm ready to call the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea's Historic Resources Board meeting to order for Monday, May 17th. Roll call, please, Margie.
Yes, Board Member Croman,
Here.
Board Member Hall,
Here.
Board Member Gualtieri,
Here.
Chair Dyer.
Okay.
Thank you.
And now we go on to whether there's anybody here at the Zoom meeting that has wants to discuss with the board items that are not on the agenda. Let's see if there's anybody else in the room. Okay, seeing none or hearing none, we'll move on to announcements, or if there's none, we'll go on to the consent agenda, and we're evaluating the minutes of the March 10th and April 19th meetings. Did any of the board members have any comments on those?
I move the consent agenda.
I second.
Okay, and then let's see, Jordan, you weren't on the 19th, so we may need to separate them.
Oh, I move the March 10th agenda. Minutes, pardon me.
Okay,
I second.
okay, all those in favor of adopting the March 10th minutes?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay, now going on to the April 19th minutes where Jordan has to abstain since he was not at the meeting.
Go ahead, Carol.
Okay. I move to approve the minutes of April 19th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, and we have a second from Catherine. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One abstention. Okay, those are adopted. And now we move on to orders of business. Consideration of a finding of non-compliance with the Secretary of Interior standards for the demolition of the Palo Alto Savings and Loan Community Room. Staff report, please, if we have one.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a brief presentation. So at the April 19th, 2021 Historic Resources Board meeting, the board considered a determination of consistency for the demolition of the Palo Alto Savings and Loan Community Room. At that hearing, staff had prepared a resolution issuing a determination of consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards for demolition of the community room. However, the board voted to continue the item with direction to staff to prepare a resolution issuing a finding of non-compliance for the proposed demolition. So we have returned with a resolution issuing a finding of non-compliance. So staff's recommendation is to adopt the resolution issuing a finding of non-compliance with the Secretary of Interior standards for the demolition of the Palo Alto Savings and Loan Bank community room. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of staff? Evan? Okay, I guess I have a few. If we can go into the resolution itself, Evan?
Sure.
I just
And,
want to, sorry.
what we can do is, if you have questions or would like any changes, I have a Word document version of the resolution, and we can make changes right into there.
Okay, I just had a couple of questions. I
Sure.
don't want to go into that. We'll open the public hearing before we discuss the resolution itself. I just had some general questions about in the resolution, there was a comment about, the property being eligible for listing on the California Register, which was acknowledged by Meg Clovis. And my question is basically, if it's eligible, is it staff's understanding that if the property is eligible for listing on the California Register, that anything done to it must meet the Secretary of Interior standards?
So for the purposes of CEQA, if a property is eligible under the California Register, it has to be treated as a historic resource.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, yes, anything done to the building would have to be consistent with those standards. Whether it's listed or not, it doesn't really matter for eligibility purposes or not.
But it would have to meet this. You'd be evaluated based on the Secretary of Standards.
Yes, correct.
Okay, I think that's probably all I want to go into at the moment. Is there any other questions of Evan? Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is the applicant or applicant's representative here and want to say anything?
June Ciliano for the applicant. No, I really don't have to say anything. Probably the only comment I'll make is going back to the report prepared by the historic consultant hired by the city. It was pretty clear that the community room does not meet the criteria for listing as an individual resource. I'm just quoting what she said, but anyway, that's my only comment.
Okay. Thank you. Is anyone else wishing to address the board on this application? Okay, I will go ahead and close the public hearing then and bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman, this is Catherine. I've given this item a lot of thought, as I'm sure the rest of you have. And my conclusion is that the architectural style of the former Palo Alto Savings and Loan Bank with its community room is exceptional. I think it meets the criteria for listing in the city's historic inventory, and it's also eligible for the California Register of Historical Resources since it meets the criteria set out in the California Environmental Quality Act. We board members are serving as advisors to the City Council on historic preservation matters, and our personal tastes regarding building styles or different time periods are secondary to our charge, which is to evaluate the bank building against the established criteria in our city historic preservation ordinance. That document allowed Carmel to become a certified local government and responsibly apply for grant funds from the state of California. For example, we just submitted an application to complete the update to our historic context statement. So our actions should always support historic preservation principles. And after listening to the rest of you, I'm leaning forward to voting yes on the resolution along with the listed findings of noncompliance with the Secretary's standards. And I would oppose the demolition of the community room.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I too have read through this a lot and all the different documentation. I think we've looked at the same property several times for different reasons. But Catherine, can you, in your kind of insight, why do you think that this is, I mean, it's been deemed non-compliant. There are some things that do make it a candidate for the California Historic Resources Preservation, but can you explain why you feel so strongly about this? That this is a, or the other board members for that matter. I'm having a hard time getting my brain around why this is such a, why we feel that this, or why some of us feel that this is such an important building.
Well, that's a good question, Jordan. And I just refer you to some of the comments that the chair and I made that were attached to the information that we put out today. And all through it, you see professional opinions from other architects. As a historian, I look at things through a history lens, but I also respect how architects look through, and architectural historians look through a different lens at the same building. And the opinion that sufficient time had elapsed since the construction of the bank complex, that we have seen a scholarly perspective on how significant it is, done by two master architects on the peninsula, that it has a place, it has earned a place in Carmel's architectural history. And as a historian, what I've learned over time is that every decade has to have representative examples of good architecture that speak to the period. And I'm sure Eric can do a far better job than I can on that aspect. But the fact that this design for the community room mirrors the bank and all the same historic materials, the fabric of the bank itself were mirrored in this small building, and that it had a stated purpose. It wasn't a whim. It was part of the original design, and it should give people visiting Carmel and those who live there a sense of what the 1970s were like, and what unfortunately, we have lived through the 70s, and we think, well, that can't be a candidate for the historic inventory. But if you look at the 50-year mark, sufficient documentation by professional architects and architectural historians have convinced me that this does deserve a place in the inventory as a representative example of commercial architecture of the period by two well-defined master architects. So that's how I became convinced.
Catherine, I mean, I guess I could add to that a little bit. Jordan, is that? I'm not sure if we have some echo in the Zoom meeting.
I think we all need to be on mute to have that stop.
Yeah, can someone? Is that better? There we go. I would just echo what Catherine was saying. There's a kitty. Is that this building is probably the best example of the best commercial architecture built in Carmel, certainly in the decade of the 70s, and could arguably be the most important commercial building in the last half of the 20th century. So by that alone, it documents the history of the town. And by removing it and removing a significant part of it, it damages that resource and damages the history of the town. And it's certainly been documented by a lot of different architects and different historians that the building is significant. The two architects, Walter Bertie and Will Shaw, are mentioned as masters in the context statement, even though the context statement isn't quite updated to the 1970s, and the style is mentioned as well. I guess I have a few other things to add, because there is two different kind of arguments here. There's one is the building significance in general, and even May Clovis in a report says it's eligible for listing on the California register. So that, and as Evan has said, that requires us to evaluate it based on the Secretary of Interior standards. And so the next question in accepting that as a basis to go from, the next issue is whether the community room is part of the resource or not. And that's where I think we have the disagreement with May Clovis in a report. If you go back to the original documents, the construction drawings, and obviously the construction, the community room was always part of that, of the concept of the building. The designers had that in their original concept. It's in all the original drawings. It was built at the same time. It was built by the same builder. And I think in the report, you weren't there, Jordan, but there was a comment about, in the staff report, about an analogy to a detached garage on a property. And we often don't consider some detached garages as part of the resource. And that's normally because they were, again, built at a different time, not given the same attention to detail or quality as the main residence, built by a different builder. But a lot of times there are garages that are part of the resource, and especially when it's done at the same time with the same quality. In this case, there's other issues that can be brought up to support it. I think there's one thing I didn't see quite spelled out in the resolution or the findings that I think is kind of important. And that is the issue of, let's see, the community room has all the character defining features called out in May Clovis's October 3rd, 2019 evaluation. And she uses these to attach the building to this defining qualities of the style, the Second Bay Area tradition. And this community room has all the same ones as the main building, done with the same level of detail, which includes the shed roof and the copper roofing, angular forms and irregular massing, plate glass window walls, traditional materials used within a modern architectural vocabulary, integration of the building with its setting, integration of the outdoors with interior spaces, redwood siding and beams. All those are in the community room as well as the main building. So it's hard to say it was just an afterthought in my mind. The other important part of it is you have to imagine what the resource would be like without the community room. If you come up from the south, without the community room there, because that was really designed as what you see as you approach from the south by the designers and the master architects. And by not having the community room there as kind of an introduction to the building, it completely changes that side of the building and how the public perceives it from the public right of way. So that alone, it seems to me, damages the historic resource. And so those are a lot of my findings. I think if you read through the other items that are in the findings that they put down in the staff report and the resolution, they all make the case that we're trying to make here, that it is part of the resource. And the other issue was whether it's attached or not attached. In all the drawings and in obviously the building itself, there is a connection between one building and another, a structural connection. And I think that was intentional and means the buildings are attached. But it's not only the structural connection that makes the buildings part of one another, it's the spatial relationship between the two buildings. And that's part of I would argue, the character defining elements of the building. And so taking away that, you lose it all. It's obviously a very fine building, and I think both parts are, just because one's subsidiary in use or subsidiary in size, doesn't mean they're not part of the same historic resource. So
Yeah,
is
I
that-
understand. And I think your letter helped clarify a lot of those things. The letter that was included, your comments in the package were good and helped to explain some of that. I guess a couple things. If this project goes ahead, it's going to change the landscape tremendously anyways. And, it may add or it may detract. That's dependent on the design of the project. Certainly would change the landscape and it would change the view. I guess my other just concern is it seems like, and I think it's not on a whim, it's with a lot of good research and good commentary, but it seems like, we applied a standard, the standard was not deemed to be appropriate, and then we went and searched for another standard to compare it to. And that is a little bit of a slippery slope. I think there's good rationale to apply it to the second standard in this case, but that can't be a slippery slope. Well, when we found it was initially non-compliant, and then all of a sudden we found reasons for it to be compliant under the California Secretary standards.
That wasn't, but the history of it was, our board determined that it was eligible for the inventory, and the council, that was appealed to the city council, and the council determined that it didn't, because of the 50-year threshold, that it didn't meet that at the time. But I think at that proposal, there wasn't a proposal on the table to demolish the community room.
Okay, so you don't see this as like, if we put forward a proposal and we're looking for another way to solidify that proposal, do you think it's just because this project's in place, there's additional commentary that's brought these things to light? Is that why you think that this has changed? Why the attitude on this has changed?
I don't think our attitude has changed at all, actually.
Yeah, I agree. Our attitude has not changed. From the very beginning, we thought this was an exceptional building and it would qualify for the inventory. It was the determination of the council that turned it around. We have not been inconsistent.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's we had this a year ago before us with another project, right. And that project reviewed the building, the proposal kept the community room, albeit with a proposal to reconstruct it. And that was something that I think there was some disagreement on the board about. I felt that we have the drawings, we have the building itself is intact. You could take it down and rebuild it to as it was, and that would still maintain the secretary standards, and it would allow them to build their underground garage. It would allow them to, basically go through with their project without too many hindrances. In fact, I would make the argument, I think the building, any new building built next to it could be more interesting if they kept the community room, created an adaptive reuse that the previous project proposed, and created a dialogue with that, element and the history of the town, as a way to invigorate that whole area rather than demolishing and ignoring what's next to it. I mean, I think it's architecturally, it's kind of an invitation to do something interesting, I think.
Let me just give an alternate viewpoint here. I do respect Eric and Catherine's viewpoints. They've been at this a lot longer than I have. But it seems to me that we are always allowing demolition of buildings where there is a better example of that style by that architect or whatever. And in this case, I think that the bank building is actually the better example, and that this auxiliary building is not so significant. That's one of the reasons last time I voted against saving it. Also, I think when I think of traditional Carmel, and this speaks to Catherine's comment, I think I don't think of that building. I think of that as a Big Sur building, a simple building that maybe doesn't align well with the traditional Carmel look. But the main thing is, if it's historic, it's historic. I just think that it's an auxiliary building that is well represented through the bank building alone. That's all I have to say.
I appreciate the insight from everybody.
Okay. Catherine, did you have any questions about the findings of noncompliance themselves that are written, or any additions or modifications you'd recommend? You're muted, sorry.
Yeah, some of it seemed a little rambling to me, but I could go along with it the way it was. Did you have some, Eric?
I thought, since the issue is to provide significant evidence for the findings of noncompliance. Evan, did you make note of what I was talking about regarding, I think it was in my email to you and Brandon, which was basically talking about the character defining issues that were defined as part of the Second Bay Area tradition of the bank building that were also part of the community room?
Yeah, that's in finding number 14.
Okay.
And then the structural connections addressed in finding number 17. I don't believe we included the finding regarding the southern elevation. I think I struggled with how to incorporate that language, but if you want to dictate something, I'd be more than happy to include it.
Okay, I think something should be said about how, by removing the community room, the south elevation of the building is completely changed and is not as it was intended by the master architects. Resolution on the fly.
Sorry, one more time.
By removing the community room, the south elevation of the resource, I guess we can call it that, is completely changed and is not the intended design from the public right-of-way on the south side. And we don't really have any sort of proposal for how that would look, or, I think it'd be interesting to see that elevation if that's what's being proposed.
Is that part of the finding?
Not the finding, but you're saying the bank building, the main bank building is eligible for listing in the so it's a resource, an historic resource, and the changes to it have not been drawn or proposed in a graphic way. Do you understand? I mean,
yeah, I'm sorry. When I asked, is that part of the finding? I wasn't sure if you were.
I don't know if that's part of the finding, but it's like, if you are going to go through with it, that information should be at least provided to the board to see, okay, this is what the south elevation looks with the community room. This is what it looks like with the proposed changes, which means you're removing the structural connection between the two buildings, and then that elevation of the elevation of the bank building we've never reviewed that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's really a finding, but we could take that direction moving forward and have that be as something included in the future.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I think they're a little bit, I think all the rest of it is in there. Okay, is there any other discussion of the application? Jordan, do you have any more questions or?
Yeah, no, I don't at this time. Just to clarify, though, we are voting eventually, once we have this worked out, we're voting on whether to put this resolution forward as our proposal, not on anything else. Is that correct?
Well, right now we are, on the agenda is this resolution of non-compliance. So I guess that is a question for staff of if the resolution does not pass, what's the, where do we go from there?
So, Mr. Chair, if the resolution passes, then that's the final decision of the HRB. Then the applicant has the opportunity to appeal if they so choose. For the resolution to pass, it has to be a majority. So a 2-2 vote would not pass. A motion cannot pass on a tie vote. The motion effectively fails on a tie vote.
Okay. So, and then what happens with the application in general then at that point? The resolution would not go through, but the applicant is obviously still wanting to move forward with their project. So what is their options?
So hopefully another motion could be made if there was a substitute motion. So we would try to guide the board through finding some sort of decision. Obviously, we are down one member right now. We will have a new HRB member next month that potentially could be a tiebreaker. But if the motion can't be made tonight, then we would have to have something. I'll have to check the rules of procedure for the Historic Resources Board. There may be something where a tie vote goes to City Council, perhaps. I don't know the answer to that one for sure, but ideally we would get some sort of motion and a vote from the HRB this evening.
Okay, and then, so my understanding of what happened at the last meeting, obviously we proposed a continuance to write out a more deliberate findings of noncompliance, but the applicant basically requested a vote, even though it appeared that they would not be approved, because my impression was that they felt they wanted to move on and appeal it to the City Council. So, and that's why we, are doing it today. So basically, if we're able to pass this, they can move forward with that appeal.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. If they don't, then they have to wait for another Historic Resources Board meeting, unless, when we get the other member, and then maybe we'll have a majority. And then at that point, if we have the numbers to pass the resolution, then they can again appeal it. So it kind of puts things off a little more for them in some ways. If we don't.
Mr. Chairman, Eric?
Yes.
I have a question of Brandon. Brandon, why were we given all the project plans at the last meeting and then again when we are not voting at all on the project? Why were they done in anticipation of what? Why would we get those when we were strictly looking at the historic significance of the resource?
They were just provided as additional information for the board.
That was all. It had no. We weren't allowed to comment on them, were we?
You could comment on them, but it was just in an effort to provide additional information to the board, because it's there's so much history on this project. You're correct. You were not voting on the project itself, but it is some context for the site. So that one, to be able to see why the building needed to come down, or why the building was proposed to come down.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Evan, by the way. There was a protection plan as well in the project plans that was referenced as part of the conditions and part of the phase 2 evaluation. So as part of the project, if you adopted the determination of consistency, you would have also been looking at the preservation plan, which was included as part of the project plans.
And there was also the vote on his architectural historian's recommendation to maintain a certain setback from the south elevation.
Correct. Yeah. So there were a few details regarding protection of the bank building itself, but you were not reviewing the project. It was all based around protection.
Okay. I guess I have just one more question, just for staff. There's statements within the first part of the resolution that talk about, that the complex is not eligible for listing on the local inventory as it fails the 50-year requirement. And that's based on council's decision, I'm assuming?
Yes, that's based on the current determination of ineligibility.
Okay, and that comes from the council, and that has a certain, that expiration is October 26, 2022, right?
Correct, yeah.
Chair Dyer, can we read or look at the resolution as it's formatted now, as it would go forward with either an approval or disapproval? Can we look at it one more time not in a Word document, and how it's actually going to look?
I'm sorry, not in a Word document, or?
As it would look going forward. So just, Evan, can you just publish that as a PDF really quickly, and let's either read through it and let's look at it as someone reads through it, like yourself reads through it again, please?
Sure, give me just a second to save it as a PDF.
Thank you.
Chair Dyer, I have a question while we're waiting for Evan. Jordan makes a good point in the fourth whereas. Yes, the city council 2 years ago, I think, did determine that it was not 50 years old, but there's also wording in the historic inventory language in the city ordinance that speaks to the exceptional nature of a property that is not 50 years old. Isn't that what you and I have been recommending?
So my understanding is that's what we did in the previous meeting, or in one of the previous meetings we've looked at this looked at this building, is that the Historic Resources Board did find it of exceptional quality and thus eligible for the city inventory.
Well, I think
that was I'm sorry.
I think that should be added to the fourth whereas, because it doesn't leave the reader, maybe this is something that would help clarify that the reader doesn't get that sense at all.
Do you want to put that bit of history in there then, Evan? Which was the Historic Resources Board, I forget what date, but I guess it was when it was, the previous project went to the council.
Sorry, I just have too many windows open.
Yeah. But we did come to the conclusion, the Historic Resources Board came to the conclusion that the building was of exceptional quality that would meet Municipal Code Section 1732040H and National Criterion G, which so we made that, as the Historic Resources Board, we made that determination, and that was not agreed to by the city council. And so that's where this determination of ineligibility, I think, comes from. So you may want to verify the date of all that, but.
Yeah, I can go back and check the date. I do want to get the code section though.
Yeah, 1732040H is, I believe, the code section.
Sorry, can you read it one more time if you just have it up?
Sorry, 1732040H. 6.32.040.H. And it says something like a resource less than 50 years old may be eligible if it is of exceptional importance to the city, based on its unusually strong contribution to history, architecture, engineering, or culture. But I wouldn't, yeah, I would just make sure if we, if it passes, that is double checked in the minutes and things. But that's my memory of it.
Does that work for the board?
That looks good to me.
Yeah. So, okay, is there anything else we want to address in this application, or anything from the board, or any more questions of staff?
Chair Dyer, June Ciliano does have his hand up if you wanted to address that or reopen the public hearing.
Okay. Jim, would you like to go ahead and I'll open the public hearing for him to comment?
For a better understanding, because I'm not really familiar how this historic board works. So the city hired a historic consultant to prepare phase 1 and phase 2 report for this project. And in that report, she also mentioned that the community building has been remodeled to single pane glass, which diminishes the Bay Area region character of the room. What I don't understand is why would the city hire a historian if they're not going to support a historian the city hired, and just take what seems appealing to the board on what's on that report, and use that excerpt on that report as something that you can carry on. Maybe I need a little bit more education on that. Pardon my ignorance on this.
Okay. I guess my response to that is that the city does hire certain historians to make reports to the board, but it's up to the board as the final body to resolve those things, except of course for the city council, to accept those or not to accept those. And I think, at least I think Catherine and myself feel that the report determination that the community room was not a significant part of the resource we didn't agree with, which was what we've been stating.
Okay.
I would also say that I would consider the professional members on the board to be their opinions to be equally relevant as whoever the consultant is. So I think you raise a good point, but it's just I think we would look at it as a difference of professional opinion, Mr. Solano.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly historically with the board, it's worked the other way, where an historian would present something where they did think it was historic and the board didn't agree with that. and so did not place something on the inventory, for example, that was that some historians felt should be on the inventory.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. But as I said, I think, you know, just want to make stand. I think I want to be amenable to make this as easy process as possible. And, you know, if we did pass this, you know, resolution for noncompliance and the city council upheld that decision, I would still be open to the idea of reconstruction of that element to provide you the opportunity to build the underground garage and build your project as easily as possible. And then definitely you do some sort of adaptive reuse for the community room. But we're not quite there yet at this point. Okay.
Are you looking for a motion, Mr. Chairman?
I think I'm looking for a motion.
Well,
All right.
can we relook at the resolution now as written
Sure.
in a PDF format?
Sure. Evan? Okay. Is there a specific part you wanted to review, Jordan, or just everything in total?
I'd just like to do a scan of what it looks like in total now with all the changes, adjustments, whatever.
Sure. Better slow down. Evan.
Hey, brother, I was going to say, I'm a quick reader, but I'm not a speed reader.
Just I'll leave it right here. Let me know when you want me to move on.
I think we're probably past that at this point. Hold it there.
And most of these are just, the whereas parts are just statements of fact that describe the process. Is that right, Evan? What the history of this?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, please continue.
And then the findings of non-compliance are the reasons why we feel it doesn't
Okay,
make.
this is all the same stuff. Go ahead. Go down towards the bottom where the adjustments were made, please. Keep going. Unless anyone else wants to read this again. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so the only change that will be made after the fact is the date will be added to this whereas clause. The resolution number will be assigned, and then there'll be a heading on all the pages saying amended on 5/17/2021. But other than that, this would be the final resolution.
Roger, can you go back to the bottom, please? Okay, I'm done if everybody else is, or if anybody else was interested in that.
Okay. So I guess I'm willing to entertain a motion at this point.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move resolution number 2021. I see XXS HRB. The resolution of the Historic Resources Board of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea issuing a finding of noncompliance with the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the demolition of the Palo Alto Savings and Loan Bank community room, with the addition of a new whereas documenting the exceptional nature of the property, and also the based on the findings of noncompliance, the 17, plus the additional finding that was added at the meeting that dealt with the south elevation of the bank building. I move that we find non-compliance with the Secretary's standards and that we are not in favor of the demolition of the community room.
Second. I will second it then. So, want to have a roll call, Margie?
Yes. Board Member Croman?
Abstain.
Board Member Hall?
Member Hall, I believe you were muted.
Oh, sorry.
Nay.
Board Member Galtieri?
Yes.
Board Member Dyer?
Yes. Okay, so that's, how does that work with an abstention, Brandon? Is it
So you, Mr. Chair, the motion,
passive? I assume.
I believe, let me think about this. So we have one abstention. So Member Croman, so you're abstaining from, essentially like you're recusing yourself altogether from the item?
That's correct.
Okay, so essentially we're dealing with a quorum of 3 then at that point. So then the majority is 2, and so the motion carries as made.
Okay, so I think that's, now they are, yeah, free, certainly free to appeal it to the city council at this point. Thank you. Okay, moving on to director's report.
Thank you, Chair Dyer. Just a couple of minor things. Oh, they're not minor. A couple of things to report. I'm pleased to announce that you may have seen already that Jermel Laurie was selected as our building official for the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea. We're excited for him. He's done a wonderful job and through a hard-fought interview and selection process. So we're very excited about that. Now we can move on to the business of recruiting for his replacement as a building inspector. Also notably, last Friday was Catherine Tyrone's last day with the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea. She'll very much be missed. She's a wonderful planner. We're excited to see what she does next. This was her first job out of college, and she just wanted to see what else was out there professionally. It was a hard decision for her, but it's something that she wanted to do and see what it is that's out there right now. I will say that the recruitment has already begun for that, so hopefully we won't be short-staffed for too long, but it'll be hard to replace Catherine because she was a wonderful planner. And really understood what we're doing with historic preservation. So she really got this program. The last thing I will say is that looks like we will have a 5th member, most likely by the time we come back for our next meeting in June. That needs to be obviously decided by the city council, but if the city council decides, then we will have a 5th member at that point. And that's all I have for you. Thank you very much.
Okay, and I think there's was there something about the CLG program? We had, did any of the applications get in for the grants, I think, or?
They actually, thank you for reminding me. I can't believe I forgot that. The applications did get in, Marnie. I'll let Marnie talk a little bit to it so she can get the glory because she put a lot of hard work and extra hours into making sure that got done. So Marnie, you want to talk a little bit about the CLG grant?
Sure. So yeah, the deadline was on Friday. We did get our application in on time. We have yet to receive an acknowledgement from the state, but I do have a timestamp on my email that shows that we got it in. I'm really excited. I think it's a really strong application and really hoping that we are successful with this one.
Great, thank you, Marnie. It's gonna be exciting to move on from there.
Could you remind me what CIG stands for again?
The CLG is a certified local government. So it's a status that we have achieved with the state for our historic preservation program. And it gives us the opportunity to apply for grants, among other things.
How much is it for, Marnie?
So we applied for $30,000. And this money will assist with the historic context statement update. We do have a 40% match. So we will be contributing about $20,000 in labor and materials towards the effort.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, I will go on to, sorry, missed my next board member announcements, if there's any. And we don't have active subcommittees at the moment. Future agenda items that we have a June 17th, 2021 regular meeting as our next meeting. Other than that, I think we're ready for adjournment. Is there any other comments from the board or staff? Okay, thank you all. I adjourn the meeting. Take
Thanks,
care.
team.
Bye-bye.